I would like to just share a few thoughts with you all about mindfulness, but also about interconnectedness, which I've in preparing for this talk, I thought, well, this might be two different Sundays that I'm cramming into one, but they're both uh, concepts in Buddhist thought that have really helped me in my life. So I'll just share with you a few thoughts about this. Um, so there are two ideas in Buddhist thought, which even before I knew anything about Buddhism, and I still don't know much, have felt important to me and have kept coming up through the years. The first is this idea of mindfulness, the idea that if I focus on the place and the time that I am in right now, this moment, and try to pay attention to it and see its beauty, then I can find a sense of peace and happiness. I've actually had this experience at different times in my life, so I know that it can happen. However, I would say that unfortunately, mindfulness is not my default way of being. My kids will tell you that I am actually the most stressed out member of our family, usually not a very contemplative or serene person. I have to say that I don't think this is entirely my fault. It seems that my brain and our brains have evolved to worry about the future, fret about the past, and basically be anxious about all sorts of things. These mental habits can sometimes help us. They've helped us indeed survive, dream of things, imagine things, plan for the future, all these great capacities that we humans have. But they can also, as we all know, get the best of us at times and make us miserable and filled with anxiety and worry. I have found that this practice of mindfulness, the practice of focusing on the moment, can help me manage some of these challenging tendencies of my brain. But mindfulness does require a bit of effort and concentration. And I guess that's why they call it practice. It's not always easy to override my default mental operating system. And so I have to work at it to reap the benefits. So this is one idea that has made a difference in my life. It's not something I think to do every day, but I'm trying to do it more often, to stop and to pay attention to the moment. The second idea in Buddhist thought that I find myself always returning to is the concept that my life is not separate from everything else, but that I am really just a part of everything. As you may know, if you've heard some of my music, I have been preoccupied with this idea for a long time. And I actually, I grew up Catholic, and I became, as a young man, as I was reading about science and what we know nowadays about the universe, I was so excited about it and still am. Just the fact of our existence and the story of the universe, and that everything, it is a story that tells us that everything is connected, that our lives are inextricably connected to everything around us and to the whole vast story of the universe. And I was so excited about this. And then I would go to church on Sunday morning and I wouldn't find it there, as a Catholic, I wouldn't find a celebration of our existence and the story of the cosmos and evolution of life on Earth. And the story of our connection to the stars and on and on the list goes. And I have to say that when I discovered Unitarian Universalism, I didn't know about it at first when I left the church. And I remember picking up that gray hymnal and reading through the words of the hymns and the prayers in the back. And I thought, God, this is the place for me. You know, there's room here for me. And there was a celebration there of this story of the universe and of creation. So anyway, thank you, UUs, for letting me be here with you all. I love that story that science tells us about how we're connected to everything around us, to all of space and time, to the Big Bang, everything. This has been a great source of inspiration and meaning to me to see my small self as belonging to a much bigger self in both space and time. The vast universe and the story of existence. I was recently in the makeup section of a store with my girls who are, you know, that's kind of where they're at right now. So we're in this makeup section and there's a big sign on the wall and it says, "We belong to something beautiful." And I thought how that really does feel true to me. And I'm a part of something beautiful even when I'm not wearing makeup. A Buddhist might call this the concept of no self or interbeing, that our lives are really expressions of the much larger reality that we are a part of. They might even go further and say that there isn't even something that we can point to as a separate self, that in every passing moment, our bodies are different than they were the moment before, because our cells are always dying and regenerating, and the atoms that we are made of are really just pulsating bundles of energy. The world itself is flowing through us, and we are flowing through the world, and we are all really just a part of one great ocean of energy. There are, you may say, no separate selves. There are only transformations. Thich Nhat Hanh would say that. There are only transformations from one moment to the next as we flow from one to the next. But again, this is not clearly our default way of seeing things. We are busy with the business of self-actualization, self-preservation, and so our deep connection to everything around us is not something we often see or feel. Indeed, for a living being to survive, it needs to be constantly monitoring and negotiating its surroundings and even fighting for its own individual existence. None of us would be here if it weren't for that drive that all living things have to endure and to preserve themselves. And so again, some effort is required on our part if we are to experience our lives as connected to the universe and not just separate from it. If I want to experience myself as being part of that greater world, it's helpful to learn what I can about the nature of things, of animals and plants, living cells, the living cells that animals and plants and us are made of, and the atoms that make those living cells and the stars that made those atoms, and to find techniques that help us feel connected to all of it. In addition to intellectual ways of feeling connected, there are also techniques that can help us feel connected and also present to the moment. Focusing on our breathing is a time-tested way to practice mindfulness. It's a way that's been done for centuries, and it's a simple way to sort of get us into the moment where we actually pay attention to our breathing. We don't change our breathing, just try to do it naturally. But if you take a few moments out of your day, a few minutes, and sit quietly and just watch, if you will, watch your breath in and out. And then you'll notice thoughts coming as they inevitably do in our minds. Thoughts will come and say, "Oh, I've got to write a check to CenturyLink, or I've got to put money into my account, or I've got to pick up the kids or grandkids," and that's just the way our minds work. And you can say, uh, "Thank you," and now dismiss the thought. Go back to paying attention to your breathing. And if we have something like our breathing to focus on, it's a good technique to try and sort of shut down our minds and just be present to the moment. That's a wonderful way that I often go to if I'm feeling anxious. Um, and what I love about that technique is that the air around us and breathing it in and out is perhaps the most immediate way that we can experience ourselves connected to everything else. So the breath is sort of the world moving in and out of us. And I love that aspect of it too. Um, and one final thought, and then I'll sing a song for you that is inspired by these thoughts. The older I get and the more I read the news, the more I need a spiritual practice that helps me find joy and peace in my life. And there's no doubt that whatever joy and peace I can manage to find makes me a better person, a better dad, a better husband, a better musician, just a better human being. The good news is that the beauty of the moment and our kinship with all things, these are always there for us. They are always available, just waiting to be noticed and celebrated. Indeed, the present moment will always be the only place we will ever live. And I would now like to share with you a song that was inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh. You may know who he is. He recently passed away, but he's a great teacher, Buddhist teacher about mindfulness. And one thing he talks about is the idea that we shouldn't think of joy as just a luxury in our life, but as something that's necessary, not only for a meaningful life for ourselves, but also for the sake of those around us. And we all know it's much nicer to be around a joyful person than it is a grumpy person or a sad person. And those are part of life too. But he believes wholeheartedly that one can achieve joy through mindfulness. And so here's a song inspired by a phrase that Thich Nhat Hanh often says in his writing. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Hey, human being, where are you going? Is there any way of slowing down your restless pace? Since you got legs, you have been running from something or chasing some demon away. So every day's the same old thing. When the bells of morning ring and you think that your life feels like you're riding on a train, with happiness a destination that you may only reach one day, but there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So breathe. There's no place you need to run to. Every place is there inside you. Everywhere you long to be. And joy, joy whenever you may know it, happens only in this moment, in this very cup of tea. So here and now is where you disembark, where you arrive and not depart, where you start to stop and feel you're not just riding on a train, with happiness a destination that you may only reach one day, but there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. So here and now is where you disembark, where you arrive and not depart, where you start to stop and feel you're not just riding on a train, with happiness a destination that you may only reach one day. There is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way. Slowing down your restless